Hi, welcome everyone. Today's video is all about switch assessment as a part of a series. Specifically, we're going to be focusing on switch types, and today we're going to be talking about mechanical switches, a particular subcategory of mechanical switches called plate switches. My name is Michelle Lange. I'm an occupational therapist in the Denver, Colorado area. I do quite a bit of switch access with the clients whom I'm serving, and I hope this information is helpful to you. So as I mentioned, this is a part of a series, and I would encourage you to check out our other videos in this series, starting with assessment and then moving through a potential hierarchy of possible switch locations. The location of the switch is really very critical. Once we determine the best location, finding the best switch site to match that location isn't as difficult. So let's jump into some of these switch options today. Now, switches are in two main categories, mechanical and electrical. Mechanical switches require force, so the client not only has to travel to the switch, reach out to the switch, but also execute some force against the surface of the switch in order to activate it. Whereas an electrical switch does require travel, but does not require any activation force, and that can be helpful for some of our clients. We'll talk about that in a subsequent video. Now, there is less feedback with electrical switches. Mechanical switches tend to have a nice clicking noise to give someone that feedback. So in the world of mechanical switches, we have plate switches, we have some that require less force, we have lever, pneumatic, all sorts of switches out there. We're not going to cover every switch that's available on the market, but we will be talking about some of the main, more common categories of switches. And again, today, focusing on those plate switches. So let's start with AbleNet. AbleNet has a very extensive switch option available to folks in their catalog. And these are switches that I use a lot. So some of these switches I've put Michelle's tool bag item on just to give you a sense of some that I use often for assessment or for long-term intervention with a client. Now, there might be certain switches that I hang on to that I use to assess the very best place or type of switch for a client. I may or may not recommend that as the final switch, but for assessment, the size and type of switches are very handy. And two that I use a lot are the Jelly Bean switch and the Specs switch, both pictured here, the yellow and the pink switches. Let's start with the Big Red. The Big Red is a larger switch. It's about 5 inches across, and it requires about 5.5 ounces of activation pressure. It's really designed for someone to use with their hand because of the large size. What's nice about all these switches on this page here is they're all pretty durable, they have nice feedback, and they're not too expensive for the switch that you get. One of the drawbacks is that the cable is hardwired into the switch, and that's common with almost all the switches we're going to look at. And that means that if the cable gets crimped, run over, pinched, bent, it could damage that, and now the switch doesn't work at all, even if the damage is regulated to that wire. The Jelly Bean is smaller than the Big Red. It's about half the size and about half the activation force. This is a good size to place in a number of locations, and that's why I use it so much in evaluations to see where I might end up putting a switch, and again, even if I don't actually recommend the switch long term. And then finally, the Specs is even smaller, and it actually requires a little more activation force than the Jelly Bean. But it's a sensitive, small switch. And one of the unique things about the Specs is it comes on a variety of bases, as you can see here. So we have a flange base that has little holes on it for mounting. We have a flush base when we want a really small little switch. And finally, this strap base, which is really handy because I can use that strap that mounts to a little base on the bottom of the Specs and wrap it around, say, the side of a head support or in someone's hand. And this makes it really easy to use for evaluation. And for permanent placement, this can be nice when only a very small switch is required. AbleNet also has some switches that were available once upon a time from Tash. Tash closed a number of years ago and AbleNet acquired their product line. So we have the Buddy, the Big Buddy, and the regular Buddy, and they're similar in size and activation force to the Big Red and to the Jelly Bean. Also keep in mind most of these switches come in a variety of colors. That can be nice if a certain color catches the eye or is easier to see for a client. Or if we need to use several switches, we can have several colors to differentiate the function of each switch. The trigger switch pictured in the bottom center is a unique switch in that only that gray area that you see pictured is the activation surface itself. So if I push on the entire surface, it's not going to actually activate the switch. I have to isolate a finger or thumb to push the center, and I can change the color of that switch as well. This can work well sometimes in capturing more of a pinching sort of movement. Adaptivation or origin have something called the Orbi switch. It's similar in size to a Jelly Bean switch. It's just a little higher profile. And Inclusive TLC has a switch that's similar in size either to the Big Red or the Jelly Bean called their Smoothie. It comes in multiple colors. One of the unique things about the Smoothie is it slopes down on one side so that the client doesn't have to reach up and over the surface of the switch to the same degree as a more chunky type of switch. Enabling Devices has a very extensive line of switches. Now they have switches that are primarily designed to be a simple ability switch. I plug it into a device, I activate it, I'm ready to go. They also have a number of switches that are designed to entice a rather reluctant client to reach out and touch the switch. And so these may include tactile cues, visual like a light, vibration, even a buzzing noise. And these are all to help a client who maybe is reluctant or doesn't quite understand the purpose of accessing the switch to entice them to do so. And then hopefully they will start using the switch in a more functional way. So those switches have a place. I don't like using those switches long term because my clients are often more interested in the switch itself than what it's plugged into. So we're going to focus on switches that are really designed for acting as a switch. So here in the category of plate switches, we have the Pancake Switch. This is in the upper middle. And these come in different colors, and there's a clear cover available for these. There's also clear covers available for some of the other switches out there, like the AbleNet Big Mac and Jelly Bean. The reason for these covers is now I can slip something underneath it like a symbol to represent what's going to happen when the client activates the switch. So the Pancake is similar in size again to that Big Red, though has a much smaller activation force. The Jumbo, pictured mid at the bottom of our screen here, comes in different size or different colors as well. Again, similar in size to the Big Mac. The Pancake's a little lower profile, and it has a very slight activation force. And then the Gumball, pictured to the right, and then there's even a smaller mini Gumball, are similar in size to the Jelly Bean and the Specs. So we're just going to kind of use those as reference points in terms of size, though they do have a smaller amount of activation force that are required. Enabling Devices has a switch that's actually called a plate switch, and it's pictured here on the left. It's at an angle, so the client doesn't have to reach up as much. I do find the auditory feedback on this one is not quite as strong. It's a little mushy when you push it rather than that nice crisp click. And it has suction cups on it, which is fine for some clients, but some clients tend to move this around. So mounting is always something that's important to look at. This plate switch is obviously designed for use by the hand, but we can place these switches, as we know, in numerous locations. So it's important to know what the mounting options are. Some of these switches accept Velcro or heavy-duty industrial dual lock sort of Velcro on the back of them quite readily. Some of them have tap holes for a more permanent mounting solution. Picture to the right is their compact switch, which is very small, even smaller than a Specs, and has a relatively small activation force. Stealth Products has a couple switches available, and they're mechanical switches. First is the egg switch, and that's this red switch here. One of the unique things about the egg switch is that it's completely sealed. So if moisture is an issue, or even dirt or grime getting into the switch and leading to malfunction, it's sealed so that we don't have to worry about it. It comes in different colors. The activation force, even though I don't know the exact force, is rather stiff. So if you have a client where they're having difficulty accessing the switch, you might want to change to one that's a little more sensitive. To the right of that are their newer twister switches. These are actually from a company called Movis, and they're redistributed by Stealth in the United States. They're very small switches. You can see less than 1.5 inches across, and they're also quite sensitive. They have a couple different mounting options. The picture I have here is showing them on these little dome mounts that can be mounted by screw or Velcro. They also can be mounted on several other options that Stealth has, and those are often part of a power wheelchair setup. Then at the bottom, Stealth also sells the mini cup, and this is an older Tash switch again. The mini cup is pretty sensitive. It's very small. It works well for someone who might use a pincher sort of movement, and you can change out the top sticker to change the color. The only problem I have with the mini cup is it's not very durable, so that's something to keep in mind. It breaks rather easily. We then have some plate switches that are designed to be activated with very low force. The first is the Microlight, and this is one of my tool bag options again because I do use the Microlight quite a bit when I need a very sensitive mechanical switch. You can personalize the top of this, so where that silver sticker is, you can change that out. Again, that really is helpful if the client needs to use more than one switch to differentiate between the two. It's available through AbleNet, through Stealth Products, and a few other companies sometimes resell this switch as well. You can see the dimensions here, and the activation force is very, very slight. And that's what makes this really a very useful switch. As a very sensitive switch, it's not our most durable switch, so it's important to make sure that we keep that in mind as well. And on the bottom, we have a switch from ASL, Adaptive Switch Labs. They mostly have electrical switches, but they do have this mechanical switch called the Ultralight. And it's very light touch, though I am not sure what the exact activation force is. I find it's not quite as sensitive as the Microlight, but very, very close. The unique thing about this switch is its shape. Since it's contoured, the client doesn't have to lift a finger up and over that rather chunky profile of the Microlight. Instead, they can more readily activate this little Ultralight. Both of these switches have tap holes on the bottom for mounting. And then other light touch options are from Adaptivation. They have these I'm thinking PayPal, they have these PAL pads, and you can see they come in 3 different sizes. They're very low profile, so that the client doesn't have to reach up and over the surface of a switch and require very little activation force. And then from AMDI, they have the Moon switch, and it's about the size of a jelly bean switch, comes in different colors. I'm not sure of the exact activation force of this, but it is a lower activation force for someone who doesn't have as much ability to activate a switch. Enabling Devices has 2 lighter touch plate switches as well, though we know that some of their other switches do not require a lot of force. The Saucer is about a 7-inch diameter, and it has that flying saucer shape, so oftentimes a client may activate this right at the edge where they don't have to come up and over the surface of the switch as much. And the mini saucer, which is a little bigger than a jelly bean, both of these do not have a high activation force requirement. So I hope this brief tour of some common plate switches was helpful to you. In our next video, we're going to go into more depth of other mechanical switch options. And if you have questions or comments, you can always reach out to me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for watching this webinar. For more information on the ATP Education Program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.